Sodom and Gomorrah were cities of immense wealth and prosperity, their streets bustling with traders, their markets overflowing with goods from distant lands. Towering structures reached toward the heavens, a testament to their success. To an outsider, these cities seemed like paradise flourishing with abundance, culture, and celebration. But beneath the shimmering facade, something much darker lurked. Despite their material riches, Sodom and Gomorrah were rotting from within. Greed and cruelty had become the foundation of their society, replacing kindness and justice. The powerful lived in excess, indulging in pleasures without restraint, while the poor were ignored and left to suffer. Exploitation was common, and the weak had no protection. Even the sacred tradition of hospitality, a virtue deeply valued in the ancient world, had been twisted into something dangerous. Strangers who entered these cities were not welcomed with generosity, but instead became targets for abuse and harm. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah lived without accountability, their actions driven purely by self-interest and indulgence. They worshipped gods of fertility and wealth, believing that endless pleasure and luxury were the ultimate goals of life. Morality had no place in their world. Any sense of humility or compassion was seen as weakness. Their celebrations were grand, their feasts extravagant, but beneath the laughter and music was a hollow existence. Nothing was ever enough. No amount of wealth could satisfy their endless hunger for more. And so, the question arises, was their destruction inevitable? Did their greed, violence, and disregard for righteousness make their downfall unavoidable? Or was there still hope for redemption? Could a single act of goodness have changed the course of history? These are the questions that linger as we look back on Sodom and Gomorrah, cities that rose to prominence with dazzling success, only to crumble under the weight of their own corruption. Their story is not just one of fire and brimstone, but a timeless warning about the dangers of unchecked indulgence, injustice, and moral decay. Abraham was a man of unwavering faith, known for his deep relationship with God. One day, as he sat beneath the great trees of Mamre, 3 mysterious visitors approached. Something about them was different. Abraham, recognizing their significance, hurried to offer them food and rest. But their visit was not one of comfort, it was a message of warning. The Lord had heard the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, and their sins were so great that judgment was near. The very land seemed to cry out for justice. Abraham's heart sank. He knew what this meant. The cities known for their wealth and excess were on the brink of destruction. But more than that, he knew that within those cities lived his nephew, Lot, and his family. Could they be spared? Were there any righteous people left in Sodom and Gomorrah? In an extraordinary act of courage, Abraham spoke up not in defiance, but in desperate hope. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" he pleaded. His words were not only an appeal for justice, but also a demonstration of his deep belief in the power of mercy. With each plea, Abraham lowered the number, hoping to find even a small remnant of goodness. "What if 60 righteous people are found?" he asked. God agreed. "What if 45, 40, 30, 30? With each question, the weight of the city's corruption became heavier. Finally, he asked, "What if only 10 righteous people are found?" Again, God agreed. If 10 righteous souls existed in Sodom, the city would be spared. But deep down, Abraham feared the truth. Could there really be 10? As the visitors departed, Abraham stood in the stillness of the evening, watching them fade into the horizon. His heart was heavy, knowing that his plea had been heard, but also sensing that the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah had already been sealed. What he didn't know yet was that his nephew's life was about to change forever, and the judgment he feared was closer than anyone could have imagined. Lot had never imagined that choosing to settle near Sodom would lead to the most terrifying night of his life. When he first arrived, the city had seemed like an opportunity, a place of wealth, trade, and endless possibilities. But over time, he came to realize the terrible truth. Beneath the surface, Sodom was rotting with corruption, Greed and cruelty ruled the streets, and those who sought justice were few and powerless. Yet Lot remained, caught between two worlds, his moral upbringing under his uncle Abraham, and the temptations of a city that offered comfort at the cost of righteousness. One evening, everything changed. Two strangers arrived at Sodom's gates, their presence immediately drawing attention. Lot, sensing something different about them, rushed to meet them. "Come to my home," he insisted, determined to offer them shelter. He knew all too well what happened to outsiders who entered Sodom unprotected. But as night fell, an eerie tension gripped the air. The news of the strangers' arrival spread quickly, and soon shadows gathered outside Lot's door. A mob formed, their voices growing louder, their demands horrifying. "Bring them out to us," the men shouted. Their intentions were clear, and Lot's heart pounded in fear. Stepping outside, he pleaded with them, his voice shaking, "Do not do this wicked thing." But the crowd had no interest in reason. Their rage only grew, pressing forward, ready to break down the door. In that moment, the darkness of Sodom was laid bare, not just in their actions, but in their complete rejection of righteousness. Before the situation could turn deadly, the strangers revealed their true nature. Angels sent by God, they struck the mob with blindness, sending them into chaos. Then they turned to Lot with a chilling command: "Gather your family and flee. This city is beyond saving." The weight of those words sank in. Sodom, the place he had built his life, was doomed. As dawn approached, Lot knew that before the sun rose, his world would be changed forever. The moment the angels uttered their command, Lot knew there was no time to waste. "Flee for your lives. Do not look back." Their words were urgent, heavy with finality. Sodom, the city he had called home, was doomed. The sky was still dark as Lot rushed to gather his family, his wife, his daughters, and his sons-in-law. But when he told them of the coming destruction, his sons-in-law only laughed. They thought he was joking. Their disbelief sealed their fate. As dawn approached, the angel seized Lot, his wife, and his daughters by the hand. "Go now, or you will be swept away." The weight of their warning left no room for hesitation. With the first light of morning breaking over the hills, Lot and his family ran, leaving behind everything they had ever known. Behind them, the earth trembled. A deafening roar filled the air as fire and burning sulfur rained down from the sky. Flames consumed the city, swallowing streets, homes, and people in an instant. The smoke rose like a great pillar, darkening the sky. Sodom and Gomorrah, once thriving cities of wealth and indulgence, were no more. But amid their escape, tragedy struck. Lot's wife hesitated. Something in her could not let go of the life they were leaving behind. Against the angel's warning, she turned to look back just for a moment. It was enough. In an instant, her body stiffened, her form frozen in place, turning into a pillar of salt. Lot and his daughters pressed on, unable to stop, unable to grieve. The lesson was clear: Sodom was gone, and those who longed for it could not be saved. From a distance, Abraham watched the smoke rise into the sky, the destruction complete. Had there truly been no righteous souls in those cities? His plea to God had gone unanswered, and now all that remained of Sodom and Gomorrah was ash. Lot had been spared, but at what cost? The weight of what had been lost would follow him for the rest of his days. Sodom and Gomorrah had once been symbols of wealth and abundance, their streets filled with trade, their festivals overflowing with food and drink. To the outside world, they were thriving cities, places where fortune seekers and merchants could prosper. But beneath the surface, corruption ran deep. The people of Sodom lived without restraint, driven by indulgence and greed. Those in power turned a blind eye to the suffering of the poor, caring only for their own excess. Justice was absent, replaced by exploitation. Mercy was a weakness, and hospitality a sacred duty in ancient times, had been twisted into an opportunity for harm. In Sodom, there was no accountability. People did whatever they pleased without fear of consequence. The weak were ignored, the vulnerable were abused, and strangers were treated with hostility rather than kindness. To them, morality was an outdated concept, something to be mocked rather than followed. They worshipped gods of fertility and wealth, believing that their endless pleasure was a sign of divine favor. But despite their riches, they were never satisfied. No amount of luxury could fill the emptiness that consumed them. Lot had seen the decay firsthand. He had tried to hold on to his values, but the city around him made it nearly impossible. Raising his daughters in such a place had been a struggle. How could he teach them righteousness in a society that ridiculed it? He had remained in Sodom for too long, hoping things might change, but the truth was undeniable. The city was beyond saving. As the angels led him away from the burning ruins, Lot understood that Sodom and Gomorrah had not just been destroyed by fire, they had been destroyed long before that by their own corruption. The flames had only finished what their own choices had already begun. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah was more than a tale of destruction. It was a warning, a reminder of what happens when a society loses its sense of justice and mercy. And as Lot and his daughters disappeared into the hills, the lesson of those fallen cities echoed through history, a lesson that still resonates today. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was absolute. Where once stood bustling streets and towering buildings, now there was only fire, smoke, and ruin. The cries of the doomed had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The cities that had once overflowed with wealth and indulgence were nothing more than ashes. The fire had left no survivors, no remnants of their former splendor, only a haunting wasteland, a scar upon the land. Lot and his daughters, exhausted and grief-stricken, arrived in Zoar, a small town spared from the devastation. But survival did not bring relief. The weight of what they had witnessed bore down on them. Their home was gone, their family shattered. Lot's wife had perished, turning to a pillar of salt because she could not let go of the past. His sons-in-law had refused to leave and were now buried beneath the ruins of Sodom. Everything they had known had been wiped from existence. The air still carried the scent of sulfur, a grim reminder of the judgment that had fallen upon their city. Even in Zoar, fear gripped them. Lot no longer trusted that any place was safe. He and his daughters soon left, fleeing into the mountains, isolating themselves in a cave. There, surrounded by darkness, they struggled to make sense of what had happened. The daughters, having lost their mother, their home, and any hope of marriage, saw a bleak future ahead. The world they had known was gone, and they were alone with their father. As Lot sat in the stillness of the cave, staring into the fire, he was a broken man. He had survived, but at what cost? He had once chosen Sodom for its prosperity, thinking it would bring him success. Now, all he had left were memories of a city that had destroyed itself long before the fire ever fell. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah was not just about judgment, it was about the consequences of choices. And for Lot, the cost of those choices would haunt him for the rest of his life. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah has long been viewed as an act of divine judgment, a story of morality and consequence. But for centuries, scholars and scientists have asked, could there have been a natural explanation for what happened? Could the fire and brimstone that consumed the cities have been the result of something beyond the supernatural? Some researchers suggest that the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was caused by a natural disaster, an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, or even an asteroid explosion. The region surrounding the Dead Sea is known for its unstable geology, sitting on a major fault line. A powerful earthquake could have released massive amounts of flammable gases, igniting a firestorm that destroyed everything in its path. Others point to the possibility of a meteor explosion in the atmosphere, similar to the Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908. where a fireball from the sky flattened miles of forest in an instant. Such an event over the Jordan Valley could have been interpreted as fire raining down from heaven, reducing the cities to ash in a matter of moments. Archaeological findings also provide clues. Excavations at a site believed to be ancient Sodom show evidence of sudden destruction, charred remains, melted pottery, and layers of ash consistent with extreme heat. These discoveries align eerily with the biblical description of the cities being consumed by fire from the sky. Yet for many, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just about the mechanics of their destruction, but about the lessons it carries. Whether by divine intervention or natural disaster, the cities fell because they had become irredeemably corrupt. Their wealth and power had blinded them to justice. Their moral decay had left them without compassion. The story, regardless of its scientific explanations, remains a powerful reminder that societies built on greed and cruelty cannot stand forever. Perhaps, in the end, true meaning of Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction is not in how it happened, but in why it happened. And that question continues to resonate thousands of years later. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is more than just an ancient tale of destruction. It is a reflection of humanity's ongoing struggle with morality, justice, and the consequences of unchecked greed. The people of these cities had everything: wealth, power, and prosperity. Yet their pursuit of indulgence left no room for kindness, no space for justice. They exploited the weak, rejected hospitality, and embraced corruption so deeply that even when given the chance to turn back, they refused. The destruction that followed was not just about fire raining from the heavens, it was about a society that had already collapsed from within. Thousands of years later, the warnings of Sodom and Gomorrah still hold weight. We live in a world where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few while millions struggle to survive. Justice is often ignored in favor of profit, and compassion can seem like an afterthought. Like the people of Sodom, many today believe they are untouchable, that their actions have no real consequences. But history has proven otherwise. Societies built on excess and injustice do not last. Rome fell. Powerful empires have crumbled. And even today, cities face ruin from greed, corruption, and moral decay. But the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just a warning. It is also a lesson in hope and responsibility. Abraham pleaded for the righteous to be spared, showing that even in the darkest places, there is a chance for goodness. Lot hesitated but ultimately chose to leave, proving that it is never too late to walk away from destruction. These choices still echo today. Will we stand by as injustice grows? Or will we fight for something better? In the end, Sodom and Gomorrah remind us that prosperity without morality is an illusion. A society that values wealth over kindness, indulgence over integrity, is already on the path to ruin. The real question is, will we recognize the warnings in time, or will we look back too late, like Lot's wife, and find ourselves turned to salt, frozen in regret as the world we once knew crumbles around us?